Dad, I'm not a kid. I'm 14. Some women have babies at 14.
Oh, there's a winning argument.
It was the coming-of-age comedy that was way ahead of its time.
I can't believe we're actually doing this.
In 1990, Blossom blew up the traditional nuclear family.
Whoa!
To create a sitcom about a teenage girl growing up with a single father.
Oh, Daddy.
Two older brothers.
Looky, 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 looky!
And a best friend named Six.
My father said that's how many beers it took.
Now, 27 years later, EW is bringing the cast of Blossom back together for an unforgettable reunion.
It was good. Like no time has passed.
The chemistry is just here.
It's the same.
Yep. It's
We're
weird
all the
how
same, just a little older.
this many years later, the
25
dynamic.
years from now, we'll do it again.
The following program.
Modern style. What's this one?
Some stupid sitcom where the kids sit down with the dad and he solves all their problems in 22 minutes.
The story of Blossom began back in 1989 with veteran TV writer-producer Don Rio.
Don Rio, I think, is just one of the great TV lifers. I mean, here's a guy where if you look at his IMDb profile, the list of great shows that he worked on throughout the 70s, you know, whether it was Rona Martin's Laugh-In, All in the Family, Sanford and Son, just somebody who had worked on so many different facets of the TV industry. And he just created a show on Netflix called The Ranch, which is about to enter its third season.
Hey, after dinner, you want to watch something?
Like what?
I don't know, some on Netflix?
What the is Netflix?
I was developing shows, and one of the things I wanted to do was Catcher in the Rye. I wanted to do a show about teenage angst, about being f***ed up as a teenager. And that was the original desire, was to do something that was real within the half-hour world, within a situation comedy about a boy who was suffering the sorts of things that Holden Caulfield suffered. That's where it started. And then I visited a friend of mine, this guy named Dion DiMucci, who was a singer back in the 50s, 60s. Still is a singer, he's still very good. But he had a group called Dion and the Belmonts, and he was a friend of mine. I went to visit him in Florida, and he had a house with a 2-car garage and 3 kids, and it was a normal household, except Dad was in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I thought, this is interesting because this is not like the dads on TV. So the original thought was to have a dad who was a musician. That changed through the development process, but those were the two things that began the idea. That's where it started.
Rio brought NBC a show called Richie about a teenage boy with a single father, but the network nixed the dad idea immediately.
Early on in the development process, NBC said that they wanted a nuclear family, that they wanted a mom and a dad. So we started out with a mom and a dad, and this is all on paper. This is before we had any actors. We had a mom and a dad, Richie, his older brother, Anthony, who was a recovering drug addict, which really nobody was talking about it in 1990. Mostly because we were all high, and a kid sister named Blossom, who was this precocious kind of smart kid, and that's the way we pitched the show. And NBC said, we'd like to do the pilot. We'd like you to go ahead and write it, but we want to make one change. Can you make it about the girl? Can you make Blossom the center of it? I already had the character name. And I thought, honest to God, my first thought was, I can steal all the stories the Wonder Years have done, and no one will ever know. So I said, that's a great idea, and that's how it started.
Who are you? I'm sorry, I'm Blossom Russo.
Oh, Blossom, well, what a nice surprise.
The title role went to 14-year-old Mayim Bialik. Despite her age, Bialik had already appeared on several hit TV shows, including The Facts of Life and MacGyver.
You do understand you could have been killed!
I know, but I never had so much fun!
But it was her performance in the 1988 film Beaches that caught Rio's eye.
What's your name? I am none other than the fantastic, world-famous, child wonder, CC Bloom. Ta-da!
Well, I'd seen her in Beaches. She was my prototype. When I write, I try to cast people in my head, and I did cast Mayim in my head. There's a wishful thinking kind of thing. She would be perfect to play the character as I see the character.
I met Don Rio, who created the show, when I was just after I had done Beaches. It came out when I was 13. I literally remember the day that I met him.
We met on a day in January. It was raining. I remember everything about it. She came in with her mother and father.
I remember what I was wearing.
She was wearing a rain slicker and this goofy hat, this goofy rain hat, and I loved her immediately. She was so smart and so much older than her age.
The show originally had been about a boy, and a very smart female executive had suggested he make it about a girl, which at the time, in 1989, 1990, was unheard of. Like, why would you make a show about a girl? But Don and I shared a love of Catcher in the Rye and J.D. Salinger, and we said, what if we made a show that was about a girl going through all of these trials and tribulations?
Congratulations, Blossom. What are you going to do now that you've gotten your period? I'm going to Disneyland to punch out Snow White.
She was the character. There was no question in my mind, and I said, let's roll the dice. Let's make the show with her. We're not gonna find anybody better than her. We read other people, but there was nobody even close.
Blossom was a character unlike any that we had seen before. She wasn't the typical kind of teenage beauty. She was quirky, she was insightful, she was introspective, she had a very particular fashion sense. You know, and I think we were kind of more used to like the California girl gallivanting on the beach, and that was very much not Blossom Rousseau.
Why wouldn't he be interested in me? I'm smart, I'm funny, and I've got the body of a 13-year-old.
In a lot of ways, you know, I think Don took a lot of our personalities and really folded them into the script. But, you know, for me, I don't even think about it as a character. It was more like this was the person that I feel like Don crafted, you know, for me to grow up as. You know, I kind of call him like my second dad, because even though I didn't have formative years with him, he took our lives and made them, you know, part of his universe. So I don't know, I mean, yeah, my character, she was bubbly, and, you know, we tried to have someone who was smart but also successful with boys, which really hadn't been done for girls on television. You usually had to pick.
Hey, perfect timing. Before you leave, I need you to figure out my batting average, okay? I had 61 at-bats and 22 hits.
Hi, Bobby. What a surprise. 361. We didn't hear you guys come in.
You know, a lot of my character was things that Don kind of gleaned from the way my brain worked. My brain was a lot darker than the characters, but he wove that in a little bit too, yeah.
Bobby Brewer, he's in my house, under my roof. I'm dying. Let's go look at him, okay? Hair.
There was real chemistry between them. You know, it was that friendship that you remember the rest of your life.
This is Blossom Rousseau, and this is my very first video diary entry. So if I appear to be a little nervous, it's because I am. Okay, here we go.
In 1989, NBC greenlit a pilot episode of Blossom, starring 13-year-old Mayim Bialik.
Listening to your parents argue is one of the most horrible things in the world. And I can't wait to do it. I'll be back later.
Creator Don Rio hoped the world was ready for an unconventional sitcom about the trials and tribulations of a teenage girl.
In the early 90s, there wasn't really a show like Blossom. Blossom herself was a really unique figure for television at that time. She was sort of the girl next door, but she was also really intelligent, and, you know, she was very curious and kind of like trying to explore everything about, you know, adolescence and everything about being a teenager in a way that was, frankly, like a little more mature than even television does today.
Well, why is this happening to me?
Are you referring to the onslaught of puberty? A feeling of ennui, a kind of overall bloat?
Yeah.
It's because you're blossoming, Blossom.
Blossom's best friend, Six, was played by 13-year-old Jenna Von Oy. The young actress had a handful of TV credits, along with a small role in the Oscar-nominated Born on the 4th of July.
Six was a very outspoken, fast-talking, gossiping girl who loved to talk about boys. Like, what was there not to love at 12 years old? It was me in a nutshell.
What did Tommy say exactly?
He goes, William's gonna ask your friend to go with them. And I'm all Blossom, and he's all, no, your friend Daryl Hannah.
Then he called me a cheese dog or something, and I hit him in the throat with my history book, and he had to go to the nurse.
She was named Six because my son was going to school with a girl named Seven McDonald. Her father was Country Joe McDonald from Country Joe and the Fish. And her name was Seven. And I originally in the first draft made her Seven. And I asked my son, I said, do you think this will be cool with your friend? And he asked her, and she said, well, no, I'd rather you don't do that. So it was either 8 or 6. So I went with 6.
You have to admit, your parents did give you a weird name.
6? My father said that's how many beers it took.
I auditioned in New York with a really wide-brimmed purple hat and probably drank too much coffee.
At first they wanted the hat.
Right, then they got stuck
What
with
was
me.
underneath that hat?
Oh,
We'll take her too.
Yeah, but yeah, I probably had too much coffee and did the whole fast-talking thing. Then they flew me to LA, and we got to meet ahead of time so that they could see if the chemistry was there, and it was just sort of, it was there just a little bit.
A little bit. Yeah, that's nice.
Bobby Brewer, he's in my house under my roof. I'm dying. Let's go look at him, okay? Hair.
There was real chemistry between them. You know, it was that friendship that you remember the rest of your life. That's what I was after, and that's what happened with the two of them. It was just fortuitous.
I think Mom and Dad are gonna split up.
Great, we'll get 2 sets of Christmas gifts.
The role of Blossom's dim-witted brother, Donnie, went to 14-year-old Joey Lawrence. The teenage actor was coming off a 5-year run playing Joey Donovan on the hit comedy Gimme a Break.
Hey, now, do you want to hear the song I'm singing for your church luncheon? I would love to. It's close to midnight. Something evil lurking from the dark under the moon.
Interesting bit of trivia is that Joey was actually named Donnie in the pilot, and then once the show was picked up, it got changed to Joey.
So, Donnie, what are you working on in school?
Joey?
It was named Donnie, I think, originally, and they named it Joey. I had success on the network as a Joey.
Couldn't remember
Give me
the
a
name.
break. Right.
Is what it boiled
I had a
down
little
to.
short-term memory loss. Like, what is my name again? They're like, for God's sake, we'll just call you Joey. Does that work? That works. That's my name. No. I think they just did that, to be honest with you. Don told me I just seemed more like a Joey. I was like, well, thanks, man. But,
You are a Joey.
I know.
More sex talk, Joey? Just a wild guess.
Yeah, like, you don't have any questions, Miss Goody Two-Shoes?
It's natural to be curious, Joey, but not to the exclusion of everything else in the universe.
Well, for your information, I also think about sports.
The complete man.
Joey is kind of a lovable, dumb jock. He is super cute. Everybody has a crush on him, including Six.
Were you, like, physically incapable of seeing that Joey is almost totally gorgeous or what?
My brother Joey? That Joey?
Yeah.
The Joey who actually believes that the sun is just the other side of the moon?
Not the brainiest ever, and he and Blossom definitely spar. They have that typical brother-sister relationship, but they also really love each other. He's a very sweet guy, and he's kind of the comic relief of the show.
Think! Come on, brain, there must be a way out of this.
Joey, something weird.
Not now, Blossom, I'm thinking.
That's what that burning tire smell is.
He was always the antithesis of his sister, you know. She was like the brainiac, and he took the sports route, you know. And
He
loved
never
girl.
said antithesis, the character.
No, he wouldn't have said that word, or churlish, or rapscallion, or anyone of the other ones. He was quite challenged in a lot of ways.
Did you cheat?
Blossom, I got a C-. Of course I cheated.
How'd you do it?
I hit it in my head. I think that he morphed into sort of the very innocent, slightly less than bright, sibling rival to his sister. You know, who was girl crazy and everything.
You're being very
yeah.
Blossom.
Hi, Anthony. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude.
Oh, what are you kidding? You're my favorite person in the entire kitchen.
Michael Stoyanov played Blossom's older brother, Anthony, a recovering drug addict. The 24-year-old actor had appeared on a string of TV shows, including the mega hit Married with Children.
$12, please. No, Mr. Bunny, I'm gonna need cash. Your credit card was rejected.
What? And the long-running Empty Nest.
And I remember the day I was watching Empty Nest and I saw what looked like myself on camera, and I called my manager and I said, I found the person who has to play my older brother.
You will always be far cuter. First of all, I came to for attention, and they brought me in, and like before I knew it, yeah, I was cast in the pilot.
You know how they say that cockroaches would be the only thing to survive a nuclear war?
I've heard that.
Well, somebody is seriously underestimating Keith Richards.
Anthony was someone who, in a way, was almost this secondary paternal influence. He was a drug addict, and he talked a lot about that very openly. It's almost more sort of like he's able to speak to his younger siblings as someone who was definitely an example of what not to do and sort of knew that in a lot of ways. And so, again, just something that you didn't really see that much on television.
Anthony, have you ever willingly done something you knew Dad didn't want you to do?
Oh, maybe little things like being a drug addict for 4 years.
He was in AA, he was in rehab, he had like gone through his teen years and like as a raging partier basically, and it was really a fun role to do, and definitely out of the norm at the time. And yeah, I was so happy that, you know, I was even going to be in consideration for this part because it was so different from everything else I was seeing, and yeah, I was blown away to end up doing it.
20 years ago, I met a woman who I thought would be a good mother for you and your brothers. Just didn't turn out that way.
They said, what's the matter with you? Why won't you do this part? It's a great part. I said, I want to be a director. And all three of them burst into laughter, right in my face.
Who do you think has it tougher, guys or girls?
Guys.
Definitely girls. We have to go through labor, PMS, getting a bad perm. What could be worse than that?
Being with a girl in labor. Being with a girl who's got PMS. Being around a girl with a bad perm.
In 1989, NBC greenlit a pilot episode of Blossom, a progressive sitcom about a teenage girl growing up in a home with two older brothers. Creator Don Rio originally wanted Blossom to have a hip, divorced dad and no mom. But NBC president Brandon Tartikoff insisted on a nuclear family.
What is this stuff?
It's called pasta puttanesca.
What does that mean?
How do I put this? The literal translation is spaghetti of the prostitutes.
Barry Youngfellow was cast as Blossom's mother, Barbara. The 44-year-old actress was coming off a 6-season stint on the sitcom It's a Living.
In the pilot, we meet Blossom's mom, Barbara. I would almost say sort of a really prototypical 80s mom.
You sure I can't help you with anything?
No, I got it, honey.
She's a finance consultant, and she's a working mom. There's really nothing terribly out of the ordinary about her.
Blossom, we're fine. All couples fight, especially about sex and money.
But how come you went to see the lawyer?
Oh, we were investigating the possibility of selling your brother Donnie.
Rounding out the cast was Richard Mazer as Blossom's father, Terry. The 42-year-old character actor had appeared in dozens of film and television roles, including a memorable scene with Tom Cruise in the 1983 classic Risky Business.
Your stats are very respectable. You've done some solid work here. But it's not quite Ivy League now, is it?
Terry is the father. He's an accountant. He is loving, a good dad, kind of clashes with his wife in all the very typical ways. When you put them all together, it is just the quintessential nuclear family.
We're not getting anywhere like this. I don't want to discuss it anymore.
Terry, I can't discuss our sex life by myself, even though I've been having it that way.
The pilot aired in July 1990. Ratings were solid, and NBC ordered a 13-episode first season. But Rio still believed the show would be stronger with a cool single dad instead of the traditional mother and father.
Brandon Tartikoff was a guy that you could just call him up and say, look, this sucks, can we try something else? Or this didn't work. And I talked to him one night, I think at the bar at Dan Tana's, and I said, you know, the original idea was better. You know, this is just another family show. Yes, the characters, the kids are interesting, but the parents, wonderful actors, but they're just, you know, cookie cutter parents. They're just parents. And I wanted a guy who was hipper than that, who was struggling, who was, it's a better story, you know, especially when you put a girl at the center of it who's becoming a teenager and dad doesn't know, he doesn't have a clue, and there's no mom around. And Brandon agreed. And that's how it happened. It was two guys sitting at a bar.
Mazer and Youngfellow left the show, and Ted Wass was brought in to play the new role of Nick, Blossom's hip musician father.
Oh, hi, Dad.
Hey, sweet.
Oh, you made it home early.
Yeah, it's nice to be on the freeway at 5 in the morning. By then, everyone's run out of ammunition.
The 38-year-old actor was probably best known for his 4-season stint on the hit sitcom Soap.
What's the rush, big guy?
Let me give you my license, officer.
The character and the work on the series actually came a little secondary for me. I'd been hoping to start a directing career, and I'd been very close on some opportunities, but I hadn't landed any. And I read the pilot, and I thought, oh, this is a great pilot, but I don't want to do this anymore. And I said no. They called me up and said, you can't say no to us. You have to come in and tell us why you're not going to do this. So I remember I went in and I met Paul and Tony, who had produced Soap, and Don Rio, who's now become one of my closest friends. And they said, what's the matter with you? Why won't you do this part? It's a great part. I said, it is a great part. It's a great series. Everything about it is great. And they said, why don't you want to do it? I said, I want to be a director. And all three of them burst into laughter, right in my face, laughing like
This guy!
belly laughs. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not following the joke here. And they said, play the part, we'll let you direct some episodes. I said, I'm in. How great is that?
Sounds great.
Hey, how was the concert?
Loud, horrible, and disgusting.
Ooh, style and content.
I remember when I met Ted, he seemed far cooler than my father ever might be. But
far cooler than any father.
Right,
Yeah.
but I think that's exactly what Don wanted, and I think that's what was missing from the pilot. And was that dynamic of the parent being as significant as the children and not just a dad.
I'm a woman now.
Do you mean?
I got my period.
Oh. Oh. Oh.
I remember Don saying too, it adds the stakes that he couldn't create with two parents there. He wanted stakes. There was a lot more pressure on a single dad who was also a very formidable person. You could tell this guy was still in his prime, like ready to take on the world, and yet he had these kids and now a responsibility with the wife leaving, which was also groundbreaking. No, but the wife left. It wasn't that they amicably got divorced. She said, I'm out, and went to pursue her own dreams, which was at the time even groundbreaking, a very selfish act to do and leave your children. And
now
he was
it's
there.
called feminism. Hush.
No, but he was there to pick up the pieces.
20 years ago, I met a woman who I thought would be a good mother for you and your brothers. Just didn't turn out that way.
Here's a guy who is kind of learning how to be a 40-something single parent in the same way that his daughter is learning how to be a teenager and how to be a grown-up.
If Yale and Harvard can't see what an asset you'd be, they don't deserve to have you.
Plus, I'm still totally crazy about you.
Yeah?
When I think back to the parents that I grew up seeing, on television, they were all, sort of, there were times when sometimes your character seemed kind of like dopey and like just the dad, but you had an identity. I really feel like Nick had an identity.
It's just for the holidays. And it's music,
Well, I think it's great, Dad. You get to play and sell these fantastic organs. It's way cool, isn't it, Tony?
Yeah, cool.
He had an earring, really cool hair. He sang. He was like really cool.
All the things that make an identity. More than that. But I was talking about that. I think it was important that at that time also for young people to see that parents are actually human beings with a whole identity. And now to be the age that Ted was, I see how important that is. That kids, not only your kids, but kids in general, see adults as people with their own desires, their own wishes, their own broken dreams, all those things.
It's just hard to think of your dad as a person.
Well, here we are. Two people.
Joey became a teen idol in the second season of the show, which, really helped a lot.
Joey! Why are those girls with you?
It sweeps. Whoa!
French anyway. We live in America. We go to an American school. We have American classmates. We should speak what Americans speak. Spanish.
Season 1 of Blossom premiered on NBC as a mid-season replacement in January 1991. And quickly built a fiercely loyal fan base.
Awesome! Oh, I'm very
impressed.
The show worked. It resonated with the audience. I think that Mayim looked like the audience, and so did Jenna. They weren't cookie-cutter, perfect little blonde Disney creatures. I think that was a big part of it. They were relatable.
We need to talk. You're never gonna believe this.
We've been dumped. I knew it.
No, we haven't been dumped, but there's a change of plans. They want to take us to one of Sheila Osterman's parties.
But that's a makeout party.
All of Sheila's parties are makeout parties.
I think, now we're so used to females on TV and we're so used to women being in the forefront of a lot of conversations, which is terrific. But, for me and Jenna, we were the lone wolves, of showing females that were both intelligent and also engaged in a social life and also still like to be kids. You don't see females like that.
Blossom, shouldn't we be panicked because we don't have a date for the dance yet?
It's 4 days away. Of course we should be panicked.
And the stories were relatable. These were stories that were happening in your house or had happened in your house if you had or ever were a teenager. And that was the secret to it.
Oh my gosh. You don't suppose this means we're the girls with good personalities?
No, we're not fat enough to have good personalities.
Yeah, I think it was really sort of an exceptional thing for people to watch the show and actually have it be so relatable because, in fact, we were going through some of the things that our characters were going through simultaneously.
There's great news, guys. Blossom got her period.
The first episode of the first season remains one of the most memorable of the entire series.
Hi, Mom.
Hello, Blossom.
Blossom gets her period and an anatomy lesson from guest star Felicia Rashad, aka Claire Huxtable of The Cosby Show.
Now, wait a minute, don't say a thing. What's different about you? I know you have your period.
Felicia Rashad at the time was America's mother.
I'm your mother, Blossom. A mother knows.
I thought, who could represent motherhood, to explain this process to Blossom?
This, my dear, is an ovary, and this is another one.
We had Felicia Rashad explain the entire anatomy of the female body in a dream sequence with icing on a cake.
Every month, the ovary will produce an egg that will travel through the fallopian tubes into the uterus.
It was Blossom's fantasy mom, was Mrs. Cosby explaining.
It was really cool.
That's so one day when you're married and decide that you want to have children, an egg can be fertilized and a baby can grow there. But until then, your body will get ready with practice every month. And then the nest that is not used is shed.
It's really a very funny and sweet scene.
And that is your period.
I see. Wow.
And she explained the whole process with a cake. These are your fallopian tubes. Here's a, it was really sweet.
Thanks, Mom.
As much as it was covering this really relatable ground, it was also just this incredible lookbook of awesome early 90s style.
It's him. Oh my God, how do I look? Madonna would be jealous.
She was super quirky. She would throw on a skirt over leggings. She's probably singularly responsible for the floppy hat with a big flower on it. It wasn't skin tight. It wasn't trying hard to be much older. It was just her unique sense.
So? Too cute. How about a baseball cap? Too Murphy Brown. How about no hat? Don't get cocky.
Sherry Thompson was the designer for our early years of our show, and at the time, the way Blossom dressed was literally the way she dressed. Yeah. She wore a lot of vests, she mixed ethnic prints, which again, in 1989 and 90, it was what's she doing wearing ethnic prints?
What are you gonna wear? I don't know. I've got just the thing.
That was a lot of what her style was. That was a lot of her eye, in particular for me and for Jenna's costume.
Yes! I love this dress. It's okay if I borrow it?
Sure, it's just lying around here anyway.
I would see kids dressed like the characters. You'd go to the mall and you'd see girls with hats and stuff like that. And I became aware that it was in the zeitgeist. And then when people would do parodies of it, Saturday Night Live did a couple of things.
Blossom? Tampons?
Whoa! I'm a woman now, and whether you like it or not, I've decided to menstruate.
Whenever people are doing takeoffs on what you're doing, then you must be doing something popular.
Oh, Blossom, I'm so proud of you.
This was a show that really debuted right at the start of the new decade, at a time when you can just really feel that like there's a tremendous kind of cultural shift happening. And I think that in its own awesome way, the fashion of Blossom really reflected that. Ironically, it wasn't just the ladies' fashion, because you also had, especially in the middle seasons, Joey just becomes like the prototypical 90s guy. It's just all there. The hair, the flannel shirt tied around the waist, which I and every other guy from like 91 through 97 did all the time.
Can't speak to the Joey thing, because
it was all
Joey.
Flannels around the waist, honest to God, it was a Philly thing. It was, believe it or not, my mom loved that look. I was like a little kid, we were young, and she was like, I think it's great. So I was like, I think it's cool. So the flannel thing, and again, there was no social media, that took off. I mean, they were doing it, grunge was doing that a little bit up in Seattle, but not on a national basis, you know what I mean? Not like on a primetime TV show.
It was not Kurt Cobain, it was Joey. It was Joey.
Joey! Why are those girls with you?
It sweeps. Whoa!
Joey became a teen idol in the second season of the show, which, really helped a lot.
Whoa, that's amazing.
He was very, very popular, very famous. And at the end of every episode, the cast would come out and take a bow. They would all line up together. And Ted and Joey always stood next to each other. And there's this big cheer when Joey comes out, and girls are screaming, and a pair of panties comes out of the crowd and lands on the floor. And Joey says to Ted, "What is that?" And Ted said, "That's a house at the beach."
Whoa, unbelievable.
Joey was hot and not so bright, and he reacted very strongly to things.
Whoa, a jacuzzi.
But in his particular Joey way, which was kind of like, whoa.
Whoa, 7 condoms a day, all right.
And that became the thing that was synonymous with Blossom and with Joey Lawrence, for better or worse.
Whoa, wait a second. Talk about your high beams. Whoa, this is amazing.
It was not scripted that way. It was written as a Keanu Reeves, like surfer whoa.
Whoa! It might have come off of Spicoli and Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I don't know. I was surfing at the time, so that makes sense.
It was a show night, and it was not, people were not laughing. And they just weren't, because it wasn't, it was like whoa
angry.
Or something, whoa, Yeah, they were actually irate.
They were shouting.
They were throwing panties in rage, in a pure rage. And it was very uncomfortable for me. No, but, and then I remember that a note came down, and it was like, look, can you try something else? I know we've been telling you this surfer thing is what we want, but it's not working. We're gonna probably cut it. And I don't know where it came from. I really don't.
Whoa, I'm still dead.
And I just did it as a...
Heaven.
Yeah, it was actually...
Angels brought it down.
It was from the TV icon God, Snow, and it came down, I said it, and they laughed, and we said it again, and there was no social media back in those days. When it aired, it became nuts.
Whoa! Whoa! Whoa!
And then that was it. It just stuck, so I don't know how that happened, but it was a kind of a weird thing that happened that way.
I have enjoyed being your daughter.
Selling the house, I thought, was a really eloquent way to end it. But I remember I cried at that table, that last scene. Well, one day I was in a Pilates studio and a young lady said to me, "Were you on Blossom?" And I said, "Why would this kid know?" She said, "I think my dad was on that show with you." I said, "Who's your dad?" She said, "Ted Was."
Blossom premiered in 1991 and ran for 5 seasons. Along the way, the progressive show earned a devoted audience of both young viewers and parents who were hungry for an honest comedy that could reflect their own lives.
She'll probably be calling us sometime next week. I think about once a month she gets guilty for splitting on us.
Sometimes I think I understand why she did it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we're these incredibly great kids or anything.
TV sitcoms about families had been rosy and everything had been okay, and there hadn't been real world problems on TV sitcoms. And Don wrote this darker side to this that everybody tapped right into and understood the underside of it, and that became very compelling.
I mean, there are a lot worse kids than us. Matter of fact, I think we're pretty great.
Then what was it?
She says she and Dad grew apart. Guess that's what happens.
I was trying to do a show that was not a sitcom, to take the half-hour form and do something serious with it, to have real emotion, to have real truth in it, and that's what I was after.
Sometimes I can actually sympathize with her.
Yeah, me too.
Sometimes I really hate her.
Yeah, me too.
I met so many people who were single parents who said, I watch this show every week with my children,
Yes.
who didn't have a spouse at the time. So
Right.
it was landing on so many different places, and Mayim was so spectacularly brilliant in this part.
Dad, you know I love you and respect you, and I understand how tough it is for you raising us kids by yourself, and...
Go with him.
Let me finish, Dad. I have to make up my own... What'd you say?
Go with him. Go to the prom.
Yes!
We were always pushing the edge because they were stories that weren't done. We weren't doing, the monkey lost the lottery ticket. We were doing serious stories about sex and drugs and dating older guys and teenage pregnancy.
What are you gonna do if you are?
I don't know.
Well, let's be positive. Maybe you're not.
Look, Blossom, I don't think positive thinking makes things go away. If it did, I'd be thinking positively about Barry Manilow all day long.
We had a sexual harassment show.
You were putting pressure on me to date you whether I want to or not, taking advantage of your position, which is totally wrong.
You're kidding me, right?
I'm afraid not.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, Joey. I guess I'll have to fire you again.
Show about weed.
Show about pot.
Have you got it? It's right here. Oh my God, I'm so nervous. I can't believe we're actually doing this.
And then I was in the interracial relationship.
Shelly and I met last night in Las Vegas, and apparently we got married.
Which, oh my gosh, at the time was like, oh my God.
See, neither of us remembers it because we were both so drunk.
This gets better and better.
Was what people really deal with. So it was different, and it made it made people at the time uncomfortable. If you look at it now, it's kind of mild. So there's nothing really outrageous about what we did.
After 114 episodes, the beloved sitcom finally came to an end. The emotional series finale aired on May 22nd, 1995.
I think, every show has its lifespan, and the handwriting was kind of on the wall. We weren't dealing with the same stories anymore. The kids had grown. I think it was just, you get a sense that, okay, this is peaked. It's done, so let's try to get out of here gracefully.
Hi. My name is Blossom Russo, and I'm 18 years old and a high school graduate, which qualifies me to work anywhere in the country for minimum wage.
The finale begins with Blossom recording what she says is going to be her final video diary. This is a nice callback to the pilot.
I've been keeping this kind of loose video diary for about 5 years now. Check this out.
This is Blossom Russo, and this is my very first video diary entry.
In this video diary, Blossom tells us that her world's about to change. Her dad has dropped some huge bomb.
Well, I have some exciting news which I hope will help.
Oh, really? What is it?
I'm selling the house.
So that kind of becomes the plot of that final episode is, we're leaving this house.
I don't want a new place. I have lived my whole life in this place. This is my place. I belong here, not in some fancy schmancy guest house like Kato Kalin.
And in a really straightforward way, that kind of becomes a metaphor for the show, that we're all kind of leaving the show behind. These characters are all kind of going off on their own adventures. Everyone is an adult now.
Yes, I do have a plan. We leave at noon like we're supposed to, then we sneak back at 12:30. But we have to be out by 1, right? This is gonna be tougher than I thought. No, Joe. Here's what we do.
Blossom comes up with this flawless plan to try to dissuade potential buyers from being interested in buying her house.
Victor! Victor! How can love be left so on these lonely shores? My heart lies torn and bleeding in the sand. Oh, hi.
She pretends to be someone who's like haunted by ghosts inside of the house. Joey and Six kind of get in on it too.
Ah, you filthy rat!
I want to be nice to have you in the neighborhood, handsome.
and they do their best to sort of make it seem as if this house is a haunted, you know, piece of hellhole kind of a place.
I was told the house would be empty.
Empty? This house will never be empty.
Are you all right, dear?
Of course I am. Why do you ask?
Blossom's plan fails, and the people buy the house anyway.
I understand you met Mr. Johnson in the Phillips today.
Oh, yeah. Briefly.
Well, you must have impressed them. They made an offer to buy the house. Good night.
But what that allows is for her to sit down with her dad and have one last heart-to-heart in the series, and they have a wonderful moment.
One last thing before we leave this one. Before we say goodbye to this house, I have enjoyed being your daughter.
And I have enjoyed being your dad.
Selling the house, I thought, was a really eloquent way to end it. But I remember I cried at that table, that last scene.
Come here.
And I remember he held me, and I remember it was quiet. I remember it being really, really quiet, and you just held me, and you just like let it go. I mean, and you let tape run, and but yeah, it was hard, but it really felt like we were selling the house. Like it, you know.
It was also a gift, though, because you don't always get to know that you're making your last episode. Oftentimes, you finish a season and you're on the bubble. You don't know if you're going to get another year, and it was a gift. It was a gift to actually say goodbye.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we got closure, and the show got closure, and we did too.
So, barring any unforeseen events like the rivers rising or strip malls closing, you know, something of biblical proportions, the deal on this house will close tomorrow, and we will move to a location as yet to be finally determined.
You know, it was bittersweet. It was, I do remember standing on the stage. I was a few feet from her when she was doing the last monologue into the camera.
Life isn't made up of poetry and songs and dreams. It's mostly real stuff. So I pass this on to whoever sees this, now or in years to come, and the advice is this: try jiggling the handle.
The ending was in keeping with what we were trying to do throughout. Things change, and things are sad, and exciting at the same time. Lives change was kind of the theme all the way through. It was about change. So that, the last one was kind of easy. It was, okay, we're gonna close this book and maybe we'll open it again in 30 years when Big Bang is canceled and we do Blossom's Kids.
I'll see you.
22 years after the final episode, Blossom continues to live on in the hearts and minds of a generation of viewers who found inspiration in a teenage girl tackling real issues on a primetime sitcom.
We're old now, we still look good, man.
It did mean a lot, and those women and kids that watch those shows are young adults now with children, and I think that that's why it's relevant again.
I have had people reach out to me and say that they have found episodes, especially people who are not necessarily enthralled with a lot of television that's on TV today. And what I've heard, especially from a lot of women who grew up watching our show, that they like showing our show, especially to their daughters and to their sons, because it's a different kind of wholesome. Even though we dealt with difficult things, we were respectful, you know, characters. And now that I look back, to think that there were so few other females who got to do both things. We got to kiss boys and also like study hard and be proud of that, you know, or be with our families and also have a social life. Right, like we got to date and we also got to explore, like, what if you like the geeky guy? Like, you know, things that back then seemed like, oh, that's so kitschy, but those are things that are, and I'm not saying we brought that to the forefront of conversation, but I think Don was ahead of his time.
They weren't difficult to come up with the stories, to write the stories. They were just, what's happening in your family? What happened with your kids? What happened to you? Those were the things that we wanted to write about. Blossom was meant to be the real stories of going through the hell of being a teenager. It's amazing anyone ever survives.
I like it. I like it. That's the move, guys.